The ballroom shimmered with golden light as chandeliers cast their glow on polished floors and polished egos, laughter and applause ringing out like the rhythm of a world that thrived on appearances, but beneath the glitter and glass, my heart carried a heaviness no one could see, because for years I had lived in the shadow of Ethan Mitchell, my husband, a man adored in professional circles for his eloquence, his charm, his resilience, as they called it, but who behind closed doors treated me as little more than a fixture in his perfectly staged life, and though my name was Sarah, I had slowly become the wife, or worse, what he once called me in a careless, cruel whisper late one night when he thought I was asleep, just a baby carrier. Those words had lodged themselves in me like shards of glass, piercing through every moment of motherhood I once held sacred, because while I loved my children with a fierceness no one could measure, the idea that my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, my dreams set aside were reduced to a biological function haunted me, and I carried that sting into every PTA meeting, every polite conversation where I smiled but swallowed my voice, every mirror I looked into when I no longer recognized the young girl who once dreamed of becoming a writer, of traveling, of building something of her own. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. His firm had won a major case, and he was the star of the evening, taking the mic with a flourish, flashing that polished grin that made strangers swoon, and I stood among the crowd with a champagne glass I hadn't sipped, wondering how many more evenings I would fade into the wallpaper. He spoke of his late nights, his brilliance, his dedication, and then, as though my presence was an afterthought, he added the words that cracked something wide open inside me, and of course, I couldn't have done it without Sarah. She carried my babies and kept the house standing. The room erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter that stings, and though some may have thought it was harmless, I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs, my chest tightening as years of invisibility converged in that single careless remark. For a heartbeat, I considered doing what I had always done, smile, nod, let it pass, but something inside me refused this time, something that had been quietly growing roots in silence, watered by years of unspoken longing, by the countless moments I had chosen love over ambition, by the weight of dreams deferred. My palms were sweating when I reached for the mic as he set it down, and though his eyes shot me a warning glare, I felt a steadiness rise in me that surprised even myself. "I'd like to say something," I began, my voice soft but firm, and the hall stilled in an instant, the chatter fading into a silence heavy with anticipation. I didn't look at Ethan, I looked at the faces in front of me. Women in glittering dresses, men with proud smiles, young girls wide-eyed, older women whose expressions already carried recognition, and I spoke, not rehearsed or polished, but raw and unfiltered. I told them how I had dreams too, of writing stories that mattered, of finishing my degree, of starting a non-profit for single mothers who struggled unseen, but how those dreams had been quietly set aside when children came, when bills demanded to be paid, when Ethan's career required me to step into the background. I told them that while I made those choices with love, it didn't mean my own identity had evaporated, and I confessed how it felt to be laughed at, minimized, and labeled just a baby carrier, as though raising human beings, the most sacred, relentless, and profoundly shaping work of all, was invisible. My voice shook, but as I continued, strength gathered with every word, because I wasn't just telling my story, I was telling our story, the story of countless women, countless mothers, countless silent warriors who carried the weight of families, of futures, of humanity itself, and yet were told their worth could not be measured because it didn't come with a paycheck or a title. The room was no longer silent, it was alive with emotion, people leaning in, nodding, some wiping tears, and I felt years of swallowed truth finally pour out like a river breaking through a dam. "So no," I said, my voice now strong, unwavering, "I am not just a baby carrier, I am a mother, a partner, a dreamer, a woman whose sacrifices are strength, not weakness, and I will no longer let anyone reduce me to less than what I am." A pause followed, the kind that feels eternal, and then applause erupted, not polite but thunderous, raw, as though the room itself had been waiting for someone to say the words, and in that roar I felt chains fall away. Ethan's face was pale, his smile gone, his arrogance stripped bare, but I no longer cared about his reaction. This was bigger than him, bigger than us, it was truth spoken aloud, and truth has a way of setting people free. What I hadn't expected, though, was what came after, the kindness of strangers who became allies, the CEO of a nonprofit sitting near the stage who approached me with tears in her eyes and said, "Sarah, I run a foundation that supports women reclaiming their dreams. We need your voice, your fire, your story, and I want to help you finish your degree and fund that nonprofit you spoke of." My knees nearly buckled as gratitude surged through me, because in that moment I realized that when we stand in our truth, we open doors not only for ourselves but for others too. In the weeks that followed, my life shifted in ways I could never have scripted: interviews with magazines, messages flooding in from women across the country who whispered, "Thank you. You said what I couldn't," invitations to speak at universities and conferences, and most importantly, the spark of long-buried dreams reigniting inside me, reminding me that I was not done, not diminished, not defined by anyone else's careless words. Ethan and I, of course, grew distant. The marriage cracked under the weight of exposure, and though it hurt, I chose to walk forward with compassion rather than bitterness, because I had learned that sometimes people diminish others only to cover their own insecurities, and clinging to resentment would only chain me back to the silence I had finally broken free from. My children became my anchor in those months of change, their little eyes watching me with pride, their hugs tighter, their voices filled with awe when they told their friends, "My mom's a writer now, she speaks on stages," and I realized that the greatest gift I could give them was not perfection but authenticity, not a life of shadows but an example of courage. Years later, I stood on a stage at a women's leadership summit, thousands in the audience, the lights bright but my voice clear as I told the story of the night I took the mic, and when I glanced at the front row, my children were there, older now, clapping, tears in their eyes, finally seeing me not just as the mother who tucked them in, but as the woman who had dared to reclaim her place. And as I ended my speech with the words, "Never let anyone reduce you to less than what you are, your worth is not defined by titles or labels, but by the love you give, the dreams you chase, and the courage you carry," the standing ovation that rose was not for me alone, but for every woman, every mother, every silenced voice that finally found its strength. In that moment, the girl who once felt invisible knew she had not only found her voice but had given permission for countless others to find theirs too, and that was a victory no one, not Ethan, not society, not years of silence, could ever take away.